How I'm going to do this with a straight face, I do not know. Chapter 1. Love's Next Door. Stacy stood in the darkness of her bedroom, watching the tiny white snowflakes fall from the sky like shimmering, sparkling diamonds, landing softly on the ground. The first day of February was turning into a blinding snowstorm. She turned from the window and made her way down the hallway to the kitchen for a bite to eat and a hot drink before setting out on her adventure. Stacy Humphries, also known as Stacy, had shoulder-length brown hair that glistened as it caught the light. Her hazel eyes shone with laughter like the brightest stars in the sky, and her curvaceous and sexy body was made to be held and cuddled through the cold winter nights. This particular evening she was a woman on a mission, and that mission was to make a certain somebody's life as miserable as possible, and that person was her good old buddy, Justin. Stacy had been away for a year, and she wondered for a brief moment if he had missed her. With a short chuckle, she made a wild guess and came up with a definite no. She moved around the small, cozy kitchen and flicked on the radio, tuning into her favorite station. She swayed her hips in time to the music as she made toast and hot chocolate, smiling all the while in anticipation of the mission she was about to embark upon. Heidi, the wonder dog, hearing Stacy in the cupboard, jumped off the sofa and bounded in the direction of the kitchen. As any shrewd dog can attest, the potential for treats was very high. Heidi careened around the corner and smacked into the table with a huge thud. "Hi, darling," Stacy cooed, leaning down to give her pet a hug. Heidi had come from the animal shelter and was within days of extinction when Stacy came to the rescue, and the bond between them had grown incredibly strong. "How's my baby tonight? Are you hungry?" After looking into her pet's adoring eyes, Stacy released her hold and reached into the cupboard for dog food and filled her pet's heavy bowl to the brim. Stacy performed an elaborate curtsy as she placed the bowl in front of Heidi. "Enjoy your meal, Your Majesty." The dog dismissed her with a regal wave of its tail, turning to devour the dinner. With a laugh, she stood up and glanced at the clock on the wall. It was close to midnight, the witching hour. With a final glimpse at Heidi, she went back to her bedroom to finish dressing. She pulled on a pair of thermal underwear and a pair of gray sweatpants, then hauled the matching shirt over her head. Sitting on the bed, she put on a pair of her thickest socks she could find and hurried back to the kitchen, taking another quick glance at the clock. It was time. Watching Stacy shovel her feet into her boots, Heidi made a mad dash for the door. Stacy looked down at her lovable roommate, shaking her head. "Sorry, babe, you can't come with me tonight," she said, as she slipped into her down-filled navy blue jacket, yanked a red woolen cap over her ears, and pushed her hands into fleece-lined mittens. Knotting a thick white scarf under her upturned collar, Stacy left the house, carefully closing the door behind her. The storm had set in. The biting cold and gusting snow took her breath away as she trudged along the narrow driveway that ran along the side of the house. She grabbed the shovel that was leaning against the garage and pulled her collar up around her ears, heading towards the trees at the back of her property. Dragging her shovel behind her and sinking almost knee-deep in the snow, she quietly made her way towards the enemy line. Her target, Justin Harold, whom Stacy had many years ago christened Sugar and Lance, was the most exasperating man on the face of the earth. He and Stacy had an ongoing, friendly feud that had begun in the first grade and had continued for the past 20 years. Stacy smiled as she thought of the day when the first sword was drawn. She'd never forget his angelic face as he yanked on her braids. They had tormented each other throughout their entire childhood, each taking turns trying to outdo the other, neither one willing to call an end to the childish pranks. She checked her watch again. Hopefully Justin would be in bed and sound asleep by now. The snow was falling heavily. She used her hand to wipe the large, wet snowflakes from her cold, damp face. Her chest labored with exertion as she trekked through the deep snow that had drifted during the storm. The snow, heavy and easy to pack, would be ideal for her task, but it certainly made her journey difficult. Not more than 50 feet away, the house loomed in the milky distance. Step by step, step after step, she drew closer to her destination, and the closer she came to the enemy line, the faster her heart pounded. She rested for a moment beside a stand of large pine trees that provided shelter from the storm. Quietness and stillness surrounded her like a well-worn blanket. It was eerie. Through the clearing ahead she could see the house bathed in darkness. Her heart quickened. The house, now slightly weather-beaten, had once been very grand. White shutters cradled the windows like a lover's arm, and a regal wooden porch supported by round white pillars spread across the front of the house. Here and there small etched leaded windows proclaimed their timeless beauty, and an exquisite Victorian door overlooked the veranda. Shielded by the house from the blustery storm, she slowly crept up the front walk. One step at a time, the snow beneath her feet crunched and echoed like booming thunder. The porch loomed before her, beckoning her forward. A small, nervous chuckle escaped her lips as Stacy began her ascent, carefully avoiding the one step that she knew all too well, the one that groaned and creaked under the slightest pressure. She looked around at the other houses on the street to ensure no one was watching as she dug the shovel into the snowdrift for the first time, anxiously tossing a mound of snow against the door. The more snow she scooped, the higher the wall became. 20 minutes later she stood back and admired her handiwork. There, ever so silently, Stacy used the back of the shovel to pack the snow, from top to bottom and side to side. The door became a wall of snow. Carefully she crept down the steps and circled the house, walking quietly back to the door. She started the game again, trying not to make any noise as she gently packed snow against the sturdy back door. With a final heave, she let the last bit of snow hit its target. Once again, Stacy surveyed her work and then backed off to make a getaway. She slipped down the back steps and turned to the front of the house, pulling a piece of paper from her coat pocket. She slipped it under the torn screen of the window beside the Victorian door, now completely hidden beneath a wall of snow. Across the top, in big bold letters, the note read, "I'm back." She turned to leave, and with a final glance, disappeared within the small stand of trees that lined the side of the house. The snow swirled around her, and the wind howled through the towering pines. She walked as quickly as possible along the barely visible path among the trees that joined the two properties. She was shivering from the cold night air, and her whole body felt like a huge block of ice. All she wanted was to go home, lie in a hot bath, soak out the chills, and bring the feeling back to her numb hands and feet. Finally home, she leaned the shovel against the garage and scurried to her back door. A blast of warm air greeted her as she pushed open the door and stepped over the threshold, firmly closing the door behind her. Leaning against the door, she began to laugh hysterically from the adrenaline rush of her escapade. "I did it," she shouted. "I did it, I did it, I did it." Her mission accomplished, she pried her boots off and slid off her heavy, snow-covered jacket, draping it on the back of the kitchen chair to dry. Her laughter rang throughout the small bungalow and echoed off the walls as she flipped on the light switch and went to her bedroom. Heidi uttered the usual greeting and bounded after Stacy. Laughing and shedding clothes, she reached the bed and fell into the soft, rose-patterned duvet, exhausted but pleased with herself. "Boy, am I going to pay for this one," she thought, as Heidi jumped on the bed beside her. Heidi snuggled up against her shivering body, and Stacy threw an arm over her pet's soft warmth. The house was quiet. It was after 2 a.m, and she was bone-tired. Forcing herself to move, she stood up from the inviting bed and headed for the bathroom. Stacy pulled her chilly clothes from her curvaceous body, dropping them to the tiled floor in a heap as she ran her bath, tossing a handful of scented bath beads into the hot water streaming from the tap. She eased herself into the heated therapy, turning the tap off with her toes as she lay against the back of the tub, groaning with pleasure as the hot water covered every inch of her numb body. She slid down into the tub until the ends of her shoulder-length brown hair brushed against the water. Inhaling the intoxicating aroma released by the steaming water, she was lulled into a state of total relaxation. "Oh," she said out loud, "I can't wait to hear about this one." Then the laughter started all over again, echoing off the walls of the small room. Lying in the tub, she tried to imagine how Justin would react to her little stunt. By daybreak, the packed snow would become icy hard, and there would be absolutely no way he would be able to use the front or back doors. She could just picture him, trying to get his athletic frame through the window. That's where I'll stop for today.